I guess Lisa
I'll
will
do it.
advance it. Yeah, okay. Morning, Laura. Hey, Laura, can we get a sound check since you'll be doing a reporting on that safety committee?
Hey, how's it going? You hear me all right?
You're just fine. Morning, Kelly.
Morning.
Good morning, Brett.
Morning, Keith.
Morning. The chairman is here yet.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Keith.
Oh, good morning, Bill.
I signed on as a guest. I could not find a link. Does that make any difference as far as we're concerned?
Uh,
Because if you have the links for the chair, I would rather get it now and sign on with that because I can't find it in my email.
Bill, you're okay.
yeah, you're okay. We can, you're
Okay, good.
you're on as a panelist, so. So, Mr. Chairman, it is now 10 o'clock and we are proceeding with the live recording, so we can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Good morning and welcome to this virtual MetroPlan Orlando Technical Advisory Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Nabil Mohaizen and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure the meeting runs smoothly. Today's meeting was advertised on MetroPlan's Orlando website and social media, as well as through targeted emails. The Florida Sunshine Law requires a quorum to be physically present in a room for government meetings. Governor DeSantis had suspended this requirement last year, and in an executive order allowing government boards to conduct business using virtual meetings. The order had expired back in October 31 last year, and so this meeting is being held in a workshop format. Staff will further explain what this means in a little bit. We will keep microphones muted unless you have been recognized to speak, and we'll use the raise hand feature to participate in the discussion. There are 2 public comment points at this meeting, during this meeting. Members of the public who wish to speak will use the raise hand feature found in the participants tab. If you're attending by phone, you can hit the *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. And when you're called, your microphone will be temporarily muted by staff, unmuted rather, sorry, by staff. And we will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email and phone messages before the meeting. The guidelines for the public comments are posted on MetroPlan Orlando.org/virtual meetings. We want this meeting and all future meetings to be accessible to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or by phone. If you need accommodation to participate in the future, please contact MetroPlan Orlando staff. At this point, I come to share some comments with you. And I'm going to go back again to this timely topic, which is the American Job Plan, which is a comprehensive infrastructure package that will create millions and millions of good paying jobs. So I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of points and that I thought they're very important. This plan is a way to rebuild the nation infrastructure system, will generate employment and economic growth, as you know. The breakdown of the proposed spending potential for this plan is through a number of areas. By 2030, Biden plans to build a network of 500,000 electric vehicle charges. That's good news to Mr. Eric Hill of Tismo. The goal is to revitalize the aging, crumbling corridors that get American people and products from one place to another, while reducing the sector's reliance on fossil fuels that drive climate changes. And we all know how detrimental could that be for the climate. The president and CEO of implementing this plan, Mr. David Bauer, participated in a White House briefing on the details of this plan, and that includes $115 billion to modernize roadways, bridges, with a focus on rebuilding for resilience. $85 billion will be going to the public transportation and to expand service to underserved areas. I'm just hitting the areas that I thought would be very relative to what we do here at the Technical Advisory Committee. There's also $25 billion for airports, including terminal improvements and multimodal connections. $20 billion to improve roadway safety, including state and local Vision Zero plans. $17 billion going to ports and inland waterway improvements. The American Job Plan also proposes significant new programs and policy changes to include building 500,000 electrical vehicle charging stations, researching advancement in pavement and technologies. So for those fans of the solar pavements, get ready. Launching workforce development programs with emphasis on supporting women, people of color, and underserved communities. Food for thought, these are some comments I wanted to share with you. And with that, I will be turning this over to Mr. Keith Caskey of MetroPlan Orlando staff for the agenda review.
Okay, well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members and everyone else attending online. Thank you again for working with us as we conduct these virtual meetings. And as always, we appreciate your patience and understanding. Based on our direction from their board at their meeting in December, this meeting is being held as a virtual workshop in which action items that are being advanced to the MetroPlan board will be reviewed and discussed, but no formal action will be taken so that a quorum will not be required. And the board's action on these items will be ratified at a future in-person TAC meeting. And this format is subject to change if the governor issues another executive order. So again, thank you for your flexibility during this time. As the chairman mentioned, we'll be using the raise hands feature to recognize committee members during the meeting and to call on members of the public during the comment time. If you have joined us on the phone only without the video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line. And please use *9 to raise your virtual hand so the meeting host can see that you wish to be recognized. And you'll see that there's a chat feature on your toolbar, and this communicates with all panelists in this meeting, which includes committee members, staff, and presenters. And please only use this if you are having technical issues or need assistance. A full record of the chat comments will be included with the public record of the meeting. We have one change on the agenda this morning. Nick Lepp will be giving the prioritized project list preview presentation in place of Jasmine Blaze. And then there was an email from FDOT that was sent to you all, I believe it was yesterday, on submitting project applications for the next fiscal year 2023 to 2027 5-year work program. And if anyone has any questions on that, you can address those questions to Nick Lepp and our staff. Then I wanted to remind you all that our transportation survey is still open through May 23rd. So we're asking everyone to complete the survey if you haven't already done so. And then finally, our next meeting on June 25th will be a virtual workshop, and we will not be meeting in July, but starting with our August meeting, we will be going back to having in-person meetings. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. So, Mr. Chairman, that completes my announcements, and we'd like to take attendance. So I'll ask Ms. Kathy Goldfarb to call the roll for the record. Again, there's no action items, so we will be able to move forward even if there isn't a quorum present.
I'll ask all committee members to please go ahead and unmute yourselves now for the roll call, and you can go on mute again after your name is called. Please make sure your video is on, if possible, so we can confirm it's you. You'll find the unmute and video buttons on the bottom left side of your toolbar on the bottom of your screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Abatan Tuono, Blackadar,
Present.
Brock,
Here.
Carnes,
Present.
Cash,
Here.
Castro,
Here.
Noto, Cornelison,
Here.
DeVries,
Present.
Elisar,
Present.
Friel, Gold, Hammer, Hawthorne,
Here.
Richmond,
Present.
Jacobs,
Here.
Dredge,
Here.
Krug, Moskowitz,
Here.
Muhason,
Present.
Nastasi,
Here.
O'Keefe,
Present.
Olore,
Present.
Radzai, Pullum,
Here.
Rigby, Giranella,
Present.
Centerans,
Present.
Hardwick,
Here.
Smith,
Present.
Sudemeyer,
Here.
Stirk, Thorpe.
Stirk is here. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Thorpe, Edie,
Present.
Lim,
Here.
Consoli,
Present.
Williams. That concludes the roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Goldfrapp. We will now hear public comments on what normally is called action items. But in this format, as you heard, will be our items to review rather, or discussion. Do we have any people who wants to speak to any of these items today? If so, please use the raise hand function found at the bottom of your screen, or by hitting the *9 on your phone keypad. When your name is called, the host will unmute your phone. You will see a button pop up that says host wants to unmute you. Please accept that prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time, Mr. Caskey?
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting today?
No, there were not.
All right, hearing none, we'll proceed to the presentation section of our agenda. We have 3 presentations listed on today's agenda. Please use the raise hand function to be recognized. If you have a question, you may raise your hand during the presentation to indicate that you want to ask a question, but we will hold all questions until the presentation ends. If you're having audio issues, you can type your question in the chat box below, and a moderator will relay the question to us. First presentation is entitled The Preview of the 2022-26 TIP by Mr. Keith Caskey of MetroPlan Orlando. Mr. Caskey, please proceed.
Okay, well, I just wanted to give you all a preview of the new TIP, and this will be coming back at the June-July round of meetings for review and action. And just wanted to start off with a quick overview of the TIP. I think most of you are pretty familiar with this, but the TIP is one of the main documents that we as an MPO are required to produce based on federal and state legislation. And the purpose of the TIP is to identify all the transportation projects that are funded in our region over the next 5 years with federal or state funds. So any federal or state funded transportation project has to be included in our TIP. And then we have the option to include locally funded projects in the TIP for information purposes. And we do that since those are important projects as well. And then the TIP is updated on an annual basis. So we'll be back about this time next year with a preview of another new TIP. Now this slide shows the amount of federal and state funds programmed over the 5 years of the TIP. And this is broken out by the main categories of projects in the document. And all of these federal and state funded projects have to be approved by our board to be included in the TIP in order for these projects to move forward and be implemented. And this amounts to over $3 billion worth of projects. And the process of developing the new TIP actually started last year when we put together the fiscal year 2026 to 2040 prioritized project list. And the prioritized project list is another document that we update every year. And I think most of you are pretty familiar with that as well. And you'll be hearing the preview of the new prioritized list in the next presentation. But this is the one from last year. And we like to call this a bridge document because it kind of fills in the gap between the TIP, which covers the next 5 years, and what we used to call our long-range transportation plan and now call our metropolitan transportation plan, which has a target year, at least 20 to 25 years out in the future. And this list includes projects that were either completely unfunded or had unfunded phases in the 5-year work program and TIP as of last year. And it includes a list of highway projects, TSMO, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects. And each of these lists of projects are ranked by priority as candidates for funding. And this was used by FDOT to develop their 2022 to 2026 tentative 5-year work program late last year and earlier this year. And then we used the work program to put together our new TIP. Now, I wanted to start off by looking at the highway projects that were in last year's prioritized list. And these are divided into 3 main categories. We have the National Highway System projects, which are major capacity improvements to I-4. So these mainly include the beyond the ultimate improvements, which involve the 6 general use lanes, 4 managed toll lanes, and reconstructing the interchanges. And then there's also a truck parking facilities project as well. And then there's a list of projects on the state roadway system. And this is a mixture of different types of projects. So some of these involve widening roads from 2 lanes to 4 lanes or 4 lanes to 6 lanes. But most of these are non-capacity, context sensitive, complete streets type projects. And these are, help improve safety and traffic flow on existing corridors without adding capacity. So they can include a combination of different types of projects like minor intersection improvements, putting in bike lanes, sidewalks, bus pull-offs, depending on how much space is available. And then there's a similar list of different types of projects on roadways that are mainly off the state road system. And you all have a link on your agenda that shows the last year's prioritized project list that I went through and updated. to highlight those projects that have had significant changes since last year. And so I'm not going to go over the whole list, but I mainly just wanted to focus on those projects that have had new phases funded in the new TIP. So starting off with the National Highway System projects, the only project on that list that had a new phase funded is the number one priority, which is the construction of truck parking facilities along the I-4 corridor throughout our 3 counties, and also extends into Volusia County. And FDOT has programmed funds for construction for this project in fiscal year 2026. Now, the other projects on that list are, the Beyond the Ultimate projects are all still funded through right-of-way. So there weren't any major changes for those. But I did want to point out the number 4 priority is the BTU segment from Eastern State Road 434 up to the Seminole-Volusia County line. And that project is now funded through right-of-way through fiscal year 2026. And last year and in previous years, the right-of-way for that project was only partially funded, and now it's fully funded. Then we have the projects on the state road system, and there were 4 projects on that list that I found that have new phases funded in the new TIP. These include the number 3 priority, which is the 4-laning of US 1792 from the Polk Osceola County line to west of Poinciana Boulevard in Osceola County. And this has a new design phase funded in fiscal year 2026. And that's also true of priority number 5, which is the 6-laning of State Road 535 from US 192 in Osceola County up to World Drive in Orange County. Then number 6 is the intersection improvement at State Road 434 and Ronald Reagan Boulevard in Longwood. And that's now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2022. And then number 16 is the context-sensitive improvements project on Robinson Street from Garland Avenue to Crystal Lake Drive near downtown Orlando. And that has a construction phase funded in 2024. Then we have the list of roadway projects that are mainly off the state road system. One exception to that is the number 2 priority, which is the context-sensitive improvements project on State Road 434 from State Road 417 to Franklin Street in the Winter Springs Oviedo area. And that's now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2025. And this project is the interim project prior to the 4-laning of this same segment of State Road 434. And the 4-laning project is included on our list of state road projects. And Seminole County staff requested that this interim project be put on the off-system list so it could be funded more quickly. Then I combined priorities 3 and 4, which is the context-sensitive improvements on Virginia Drive, Forest Avenue, and Corrine Drive. And this project is now partially funded through construction in fiscal year 2026. It has about $3.5 million in federal SU funds program for construction, and the total construction for this project is about $9 million. Then number 5 is a context-sensitive project on East Church Avenue in Longwood, and that's now funded for construction in 2025. Number 15 is a context-sensitive project on Orange Boulevard near Sanford. That's funded for construction in 2026. And then number 20 is the context-sensitive project on Warren Avenue in Longwood, and that has a new design phase funded in 2025. Then we have our TSMO, Transportation System Management and Operations projects. And these are relatively low-cost projects that help improve safety and traffic flow. And so they include projects like minor intersection improvements, traffic signalization projects, putting in dynamic message signs, and as well as infrastructure for connected and autonomous vehicles and so on. And we have a list of countywide and citywide projects. And the number 1 and 2 priorities on that list are the upgrades to Orange County's traffic signal cabinets. And that project is now funded through construction in fiscal year 2025. And there are 2 other TSMO projects that had new phases funded. Both of these are in Osceola County. Number 4 is the adopted signal system on Osceola Parkway, which is now funded for design. And then number 11 is roundabouts on Marigold Avenue in Poinciana, and that's now funded for construction. Then we have regional trail and school mobility projects. And there were 4 school mobility projects that all have new phases funded. These are all sidewalk projects in Osceola County near elementary schools. And 3 of these projects are now funded through construction, and the other project has a new design phase funded. Then there are 5 regional trail projects that are all now funded through construction. 3 of these are in Orange County. They include the Little Econ Trail Phase 3, the Sandspur Trail in Maitland, and then the Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail. And then the other 2 are both in Seminole County. These include the Central Castleberry Connectivity Improvements and the Spring Lake Road Trail in Altamont Springs. Then for the transit projects, we have a list of projects that are implemented by LYNX. And I'm not going to go through all those, but these include projects like purchasing buses and other vehicles, putting in transit centers and super stops, and operating expenses and things of that nature. And then for the last several years, MetroPlan has had a policy of setting aside up to 30% of this area's district dedicated revenue funds, which are state funds for the operation of premium transit projects. And these are projects that have been identified in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan as being over and above regular fixed route bus service. So these can include any type of rail transit, such as commuter rail or light rail and so on, as well as bus rapid transit in an exclusive corridor, trolley systems and things of that nature. And these projects have been divided into 3 categories based on their eligibility to use the DDR operating funds. And so category A are the premium transit projects that have had their planning and feasibility studies already completed. So these are the most ready to use the operating funds once they're up and running. And this list has been the same for the last several years, and there weren't really any changes to these projects. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but we still have the Sunrail Phase 3 as number 1 priority, and this will run from the Sunrail main line near the Meadowwood Station over the Orlando International Airport. And this project may be done in conjunction with the Brightline system that's currently underway. And then we have the OIA connector, which would most likely be a bus rapid transit system running from the Orange County Convention Center over to the airport. And then there's the US 192 BRT in Osceola County. And then the others, priorities 4 through 7, again, those have been on the list for a while, and there were no changes to those projects. Then for category B, these are projects that are not quite as far along. They have not had their planning and feasibility studies completed yet. So once those studies are completed, these projects can move up to category A and be eligible for the DDR operating funds. But right now, they're not considered to be eligible. And the first 4 priorities on that list are the same as they've been for the last several years. We have the Innovation Way Corridor Enhanced Transit in East Orange County. And then priorities 2 through 4 are all projects along International Drive that being planned by Orange County. Now, there were 3 new projects that were added under category B in last year's prioritized project list. And these are all enhanced transit corridor studies along 3 different corridors in our region. These include US 1792 from downtown Orlando up to State Road 436, and then along US 441 from Apopka down to the Florida Mall, and then the Pine Hills Kirkman corridor down to Universal Orlando. And then category C are those transit projects that are just enhancements to LYNX's existing fixed route bus system. So these are not considered to be premium transit and are not eligible for the DDR operating funds. But these include the expansion of LYNX's fixed route bus fleet, as well as bus service expansion on major corridors in the area that have been identified by LYNX. And then finally, we have a list of locally funded widening projects, roadway widening projects that are candidates for the Transportation Regional Incentive Program funds or TRIP funds. And these are state funds that local jurisdictions can use for major transportation projects. But in order to use these funds, they have to come up with at least 50% in local matching funds. And I didn't see any of these projects that received TRIP funds in the new 5-year work program. However, the 4-laning project on Neptune Road from Barton Settlement Road to US 192 in Osceola County is now funded for right-of-way in fiscal year 2021. and the majority of those funds are Osceola County's local funds. But this project did receive $500,000 in federal SU funds for right-of-way in a recent TIP amendment, and that makes that project eligible to receive additional federal funding. So that's an overview of how some of the projects in last year's prioritized project list have had new phases funded in the new TIP. I did want to mention that, of course, this area has a lot of toll road projects as well, and I didn't include those in the presentation today, just in the interest of time, and since those projects are not included in the prioritized project list. But of course, we will be including the Turnpike and CFX projects in our TIP as well. And we will be having a public meeting on the TIP. This will be a virtual meeting on our website, and this will be on Monday, June 21st. It'll be from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. and we'll be sending out additional information on that. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and at this point, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Caskey. Any questions from Mr. Caskey on this good overview of the TIP?
I see Renzo has his hand up.
Yes. Mr. Anastasi, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Caskey, for that overview. I have a question on Corrine Drive. So I see that construction is funded in 23-24. So who's doing the construction on that project?
I believe it's being managed by the city of Orlando. The funds
On a
that are
county
taken-
road?
Well, actually, Renzo, that's probably something we're gonna need to continue to discuss. We had it programmed with the understanding that it was keep moving forward with the transfer. So design is coming up in 22-23 for funding, and then construction for 23-24. So we will probably, Orange County, City of Orlando, MetroPlan will probably have to sit down and discuss that as LAP is coming up.
Looking forward to the discussion.
All right. Any other question for Mr. Caskey? I see none. I don't see any hands. Mr. Caskey, do you see any other hands?
I don't see any.
All right. Can I ask you to elaborate on what does it mean when you put a project off of the list or off of the system? Does that mean that the local government is to be in charge of that on its own, or could you explain that to the group?
Well, the list of off-system projects on the prioritized project list are, again, with the exception of that State Road 434 project, those are all projects that, would be on county roads or, that are not on the state road system. So generally, these projects would be the responsibility of the local jurisdictions, but they are eligible for, federal SU funding.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. The next item would be to review the 2027.
I think, wait just a second. I think Renzo has another question.
Yeah, thank you again. So a quick question for Mr. Lepp. When we had a discussion regarding the prioritized project list and the process, we were also going to address equity. So I don't know, has that been factored into this new proposed prioritized project list?
That conversation has not made its way to the board yet for the board to decide on equity. So the project priority list that we are going forward with right now is still operating under the performance-based planning document that was adopted with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So it's still dealing with a regional prioritization.
So I also believe that we were to be informed as to the, not the methodology, but the point system and how the MetroPlan staff actually went through the process of prioritizing projects.
Yes, that's actually my next presentation.
Very timely, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. I can't see if you're raising your hand, Mr. Nastasi, so you'd have to speak up next time, please. Our next the next item on the agenda is a presentation to review the 2027-36 PPL by Mr. Nick Lepp of MetroPlan Orlando. Mr. Knack, you have the floor.
Thank you. So this is going to be the preview of that prioritized project list, as I just mentioned. And as Keith has mentioned, this is that gap or that bridge between the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program. As you all are aware, we adopted a new Metropolitan Transportation Plan back in December, which kind of resets the system. So a lot of the presentation that Keith was giving just prior was still based off of the old prioritized project list, which pivoted from the 2040 long range plan. And if we remember, that 2040 long range plan was a very largely state roadway driven, widening, get the red out modeling exercise, and had few multimodal projects. So this new Metropolitan Transportation Plan really aligns the plan itself with the process that we have been working towards over the past couple of years for more multimodal and safety, and aligning those projects not only by location on and off the state road system, but by funding type. Also, what's new within this process is that the prioritized project list is no longer a mirror of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan cost feasible plan. New requirements that have come out from the Federal Highway Administration are that only projects identified in the first 10 years of the plan are eligible to be programmed in the TIP. So anything outside of that, so that last 10 years, though we call illustrative and are still cost feasible, would require an MTP amendment to demonstrate that they have a higher priority to bring them up into those first 10 years, which is something that we are putting into our process now, just to be more aligned with the federal process, that we'll have a 25-year Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which will be kind of that kitchen sink of projects of $25 billion worth of cost feasible projects. And then our prioritized project list will be that 10-year window of those next list of projects that could have that potential of moving into the TIP, which is that 5-year plan. Next slide, please. So as just a reminder, this is a direct linkage from the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which was developed based on our regional goals and objectives, and also those performance measures that we put in. The plan itself also is consistent with our MetroPlan funding policies, which allocates those federal TMA funds to, as the question came up, of off-system roads. And what we define as off-system is anything that is not a state road, but is federally functionally classified. And next slide, please. And I will get to the map of those in a minute. And these are those performance measures that we have collectively developed through that Metropolitan Transportation Plan process. Each goal and objective has a performance measure, and those measures are evaluated each year on each segment, and were provided to you by a link through this process, so you could review where each quarter was setting with all of these performance measures as we're going into this ranking process and our first real performance-based prioritization on the 2045 MTP. Next slide, please. So there are multiple lists. How we've categorized it in the past, we've kind of kept that same organization of having national highway and state roads. And these largely include our roadway widenings and complete streets, TSMO projects, bicycle pedestrian trails, as well as the Sun Trail, but all on the state road or national highway system. Projects must be adopted in the MTP with these performance measures to kind of move forward before they can be entered into the TIP. But then any written authorization needs to be done by MetroPlan Orlando to use any of those TMA funds on any of those projects that are kind of outside the MTP. And I'll explain that a little bit more on the next slides. Next slide, please. So here's how our funding policies came out in the last Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Historically, we've always had just other arterial funds, that top box, as well as the MPO managed TMA funds, all in one pot. And the last 2040 long range plan had a cost feasible list that just utilized all of those funding sources and had a list of projects. This 2045 plan structures it a little bit more to follow our funding policies and our goals and objectives of meeting those targets, not only on the state road system, but off the state road system. So for example, on the National Highway System, under those other arterial funds, we've actually pulled out a program for $2 million a year for TSMO on the National Highway or State Road System. Similar to the process that we've done with our TSMO group, this is going to allow DOT to have a pot of funds set aside for some of that technology and equipment that's needed to help get us ready for the future. A new program also included in this is our off-system construction, which Alex will explain in a little bit more detail with one of the amendments. But this was a program that started off as off-system widening, utilizing 10% of those other arterial funds. And this is consistent with Florida's revenue handbook, that 10% of those funds can be used for off-system roads, which pretty much equates to those SA funds, which are those federal funds that come to our district for other projects. So we have now a new list that we're looking to utilize that for that off-system kind of construction assistance. And that could also utilize some of those TRIP funds as the match as we're looking for programming in the future. And then going down into our MPO managed TMA list, these are the complete streets, bicycle pedestrian, TSMO, and regional transit that we've had historically, and we have a board funding policy for those. And we've broken them down into having a couple set-asides, but it's still largely the same program that we are allocating our SU, TALU, all of those TMA funds to these off-system projects. And within this 2045 plan, we've actually structured our cost feasible list to reflect this. So that way we have all of the projects within our region identified on specific lists using these funding sources to make sure that we are meeting our goals and our targets. Next slide, please. So the National Highway System, state roads, there are plenty of projects that were just recently funded in the TIP. Keith just went over those. State Road 50, which we had on the high up on the priority list, as well as Robinson Road, are all now included in the current TIP. So they're off the priority list. Next slide, please. And then some of the updates. So now, as I mentioned, the number one project that we're seeing, we set aside those TSMO funds under the state roads. Keith also mentioned that the 434 project from Franklin to 417, which was originally on our TMA list, now with the new Metropolitan Transportation Plan and our policy of using state funds on state roads, that 434 project has now made it back over to the state road list for construction funding and to be prioritized for that. As well as 1792, both of those were consistent with old lists, as well as 535, and then the Robinson Street project. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, that new program for off-system construction assistance, this is those 10% of other arterial funds, which are basically the combination of federal and state funds in the Transportation Infrastructure Bank that the department forecast for future use. But within this program, it's not the same as, say, our TMA Complete Street program, where we're looking to fund design, right-of-way, and construction. This is to really assist our local governments with that construction side of the project. So we're looking for the local governments to perform the PD&E, design and right-of-way and environmental that's needed, and then we can utilize this program to assist with that higher cost construction, since it is outside of the TMA program that has those $4 million caps. This program won't have that cap, so it can use almost all of the available funds, which we estimate around $10 to $14 million per year. But as I mentioned, this could also be that 50% match to utilize those TRIP funds. So this could be a good program to start advancing some of those off-system widenings or those TRIP projects that have remained on our priority list for years and haven't been able to move forward because we haven't had a mechanism for that. Next slide, please. So within that, we sent out an email and we had a couple projects that were submitted. These were the rankings of those projects. Now, again, all of these projects are located currently in the local funding list, but like we said, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan now is a working document. We will be working with our local government partners at all times. So if there's any changes or a new project or a change in the status of these projects, they can be moved from, say, a local list and considered for an off-system construction list, or even if it's a project that we haven't had in the past, we would welcome the opportunity to add it to our Metropolitan Transportation Plan so we all have one consistent large master plan of all the transportation needs that are in the region. Next slide, please. So looking at our MPO TMA funding of the TISMO and ITS improvements, funded in the TIP as mentioned, were the signal cabinet upgrades and the Marigold that we've been trying to get programmed. Next slide, please. And then here are some of the updated projects. And as I mentioned, we have a couple new programs. We have the support of the Regional Traffic Retiming System program that we are continuing at $1 million per year. We also have the Regional TISMO program. And this was that second group of projects that we were looking for those regional kind of equipment. It kind of fits in with the signal cabinet replacements in Orange County, something that's not kind of corridor specific, but more of equipment that's needed on a larger area. So we've had those, we put those as a set aside, something that the TISMO committee and the technical advisory committee can work towards prioritizing and utilizing those funds. But also within there, we have the automated connected vehicle demonstration program, and that's funded at $250,000 per year, which we're looking for candidate projects in the years of 25 and 26 to start that program, and something to support Eric's work that came out of the CAV readiness study. And then traditionally, we have our other TISMO projects that are consistent with not only the old priority list, but actually in a little bit more detail as we've gone through not only the ITS master plan and all of our priorities. We've looked at each corridor to see what is remaining and what kind of gaps are needed to fulfill that master plan, as well as where the remaining needs are for TISMO activities. Next slide, please. On the complete street list, as mentioned, Virginia Drive or the Corrine study, as well as the Virginia Drive from Orange to Mills, those were both originally funded for design, and now we've advanced those to have some construction funds, as well as the East Church Street project and the Orange Boulevard. Construction was put into the TIP, but as mentioned by Alex in a previous presentation, and will be again, the county has decided not to use federal funds for that because of some of the right-of-way acquisitions. So that project will actually be pulled back out for local funding, and those funds will be returned to be used for another priority. Next slide, please. And then the remaining projects within our priority list, we have at the top of the list, continuing our Complete Street Studies program. That was one of that program that funded the Corrine Drive, as well as the 10th Street corridor study that's going on currently. But within that, we're also pulling out funds to continue our performance data management collection process. And that is the purchase of streetlight data and the use of MyoVision and other technology to help us do our transportation planning and performance management. Some of the highlights that have come out, we have West Warren Ave has risen up, as well as Central Ave down in Kissimmee, Michael Gladden Boulevard, Church Street, and Old Dixie Highway are some of the top ranked complete street projects that are now prioritized in this new process. Next slide, please. As for the bike ped improvements, Keith went over several of these already. As mentioned, the Sandspur project, which is in there. Also, Maitland has decided to fund that with some local funds. So those funds will go back into our reserve box, and we will look to program those in this next cycle with this next list of priorities. Next slide, please. And with that, we're still continuing with our school mobility program, allocating 20% of those bike ped funds to safe routes to schools, as well as looking at sidewalk gaps. We've identified large areas of sidewalk gaps, not just on small sections, but more of a neighborhood or a city focus. So we'll be looking to work with our advisory committees to start funding those programs when the funding becomes available in 25 and 26. And still as priorities are the Little Econ Trail, as well as Shingle Creek and the East-West Trail. And we still have the 2 Sunrail Trail program projects high up on the priority list, still looking for that remaining construction funding to finish that within our region. Next slide, please. And then the transit projects, Keith presented it before as A, B, and C for that DDR funding. That's still continuing, but we've just identified where those major projects have landed within the ranking process. So within that, the #1 project is still to continue to support LYNX in their transit asset management and maintaining the system. We still have the Sunrail Phase 3 as our #1 project for premium transit. But then the two other major projects we kind of knew, but they were mentioned in previous lists, were the southern and northern operation bases. And this conversation came up quite a bit during the MTP about transit expansion and the fact that we really need, LYNX needs those operation bases to help improve their current operations and expand the system prior to any really new routes that can come in. And next slide, please. So this is kind of a different list that we've sent in the past. Before, we have sent an updated project priority list, but since all of our discussions we've had before on performance-based planning and the process we use for ranking and how we actually come up with these priorities, we wanted to transmit a simpler list for this draft preview, identifying where these corridors are that were our highest ranked based on that performance-based planning process. We've also provided a link to a GIS file or an interactive map on our website, which has all of this information by segment with each performance measure. So local governments can go in and look at your area and the network within it and identify if you see any discrepancies between the data that we've collected, which has been used for this ranking. And we ask if you can have any feedback to us by June 9th as we start preparing that draft project priority list, which will include similar items that you're used to seeing of what is that phase that we're looking to fund next within the process. And ultimately, we will have this final list back to you for your next, prior to your next technical advisory committee meeting, at least a week prior, and still give comments before we take it back to the board on June 7th. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions on the priority list, but I think this is also leads to a good opportunity to discuss the email that went out to most of you regarding the new process for applications, which is still tied to our prioritization process. So I will open up the floor for questions.
Thanks, Nick. Excellent presentation. Any questions for Nick, please? Remember to use the raise hand function in your dialog box.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like Hasm has his hand raised.
Mr. Assar, please proceed. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Nick for the presentation. I just wanted to get some clarification on how these projects have been selected. Is it purely based on the score, or is there any other criteria that were used to rank these projects?
Right now, they are currently based on the score itself. Each one of those performance measures has a scale ranking, and there's a document out there on our prioritization process that was adopted with the MTP. So it has each one of those measures and what the scale is to give it that ranking score.
Yeah, I was looking at your prioritization scoring tool, which is a GIS-based system, and doesn't seem to match with these scores shown on the priority list.
Okay, I'll have to look into that because it was a one-to-one of the database that we pulled out, but we'll check on that.
Yeah, there were definitely several projects that were skipped over for lower scores.
Were you looking at because there's two scoring, there's a raw scoring and then there's a normalized scoring?
Normalized.
Okay.
That's the one that you're using primarily, right?
That is correct. That's the one that matches the tables that were submitted.
Okay. Yeah, if you like, I can send you a list of those corridors that were skipped over.
Sure. We'll set up a time to discuss.
All right. My second question is, how did you decide on the type of projects to be listed?
Can you elaborate?
Whether it's ITS technology or safety or widening, or how did you decide that? Or complete streets?
Through the process of the working group and consistent with our other policies and projects. So anything that was identified as a complete street need through the MTP remained on a complete street list. ITS, any intersection, ITS or technology went more towards the TISMO. And again, anything that was bike, ped, or trail related or school mobility went towards the school mobility. But under the state road list, they were all just identified as what kind of need was out there, and they were just all located on the state road or national highway list.
Yeah, but most of these projects are really brand new. They've never been discussed at the committee level before. So that's why I'm questioning how to decide on the type of project to be selected.
Well, that was all determined through the needs process, which was brought to the working group and the public and the committees as we identified what our needs were out there. And this plan itself, actually, as I like to term it, is kind of a kitchen sinks of needs. We had all of the needs identified by Orange County through their sales tax program, worked with our other local government partners to identify all other needs that were out there. And then from that needs list and what that need was, it was determined if they could be cost feasible based on performance-based planning.
Well, yeah.
So we worked with consultant, and they've been working. Yeah.
Again, I at least speaking for Orange County, I don't think these needs have been identified in the past. Some other needs have been identified and they were skipped over. But anyway, we can set up another discussion if you like.
Yes, because Orange County is largely reflected from your sales tax list needs.
Sales tax needs?
That is correct.
What document are you referring to?
The document provided by Orange County identifying all of the projects used to calculate the sales tax initiative.
Well, if you can.
If you guys have changes, that's fine. That's why we have a working document. We want to make sure we're consistent, but at the time, those were the needs that were provided, and we incorporated them in and developed a cost feasible plan.
We can look into it again.
Thank you.
All right. Good discussion, and it sounds justifiably Orange County is one of the largest county, and I'm sure Mr. Lev realizes why would Mr. Assar would have to discuss these further on the sideline. So I wish you both well. Maybe we can, if anything comes out of that discussion that would benefit the group, we can hear about it. So I want to thank you both. Anybody has any other questions for Mr. Lev?
Mr. Chairman, Josh DeVries has his hand raised.
All right, thank you. Mr. DeVries, you're recognized.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. So I've got a question about the ranking of the trail projects or multimodal bike / pedestrian / school mobility TMA fund projects. I don't see a score in that table. And then there was a few trails that were on the previous PPL that I don't, for Osceola County anyways, that I don't see on here. So I was wondering if you could provide a little clarification, at least on the scoring.
The scoring itself was largely based on the original rankings, since our performance-based score process was on roadway systems, and the off-trail didn't have all of the same metrics. As for the missing projects, they're not missing. They're still within our cost feasible plan, but they have been identified for funding between the 2035 and 2045 timeframe. So still within our plan as cost feasible, but wouldn't be eligible to get into the TIP because it's not within the first 10 years.
Okay.
So that would be if things change and we rank and we evaluate all of the quarters and all of the projects. So if something changes and it does rise to a priority level to be within the next 10 years, that would be an MTP amendment that we can entertain.
Okay.
All right, next, Ms. Garanola, please proceed. Ms. Garanola. You're muted if you're trying to speak.
I think she actually dropped off. I
Okay.
don't see her up there anymore.
I saw
But
Mr. Brock. Mr. Brock, are you still interested in asking a question?
No, I think Nick answered it. My question, because if you compare this to the current priority list, there are lots of projects that are not shown in the draft, but that's because they're outside that 10-year window. Is that right, Nick?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
So we, in an effort to streamline the process, and actually I can, this might be a good opportunity going into addressing that email. Historically, we've asked for an application for any project that could be considered, and it went all the way through the end of our long range plan, so through 2040. So we had a long and extensive priority list that we knew a lot of projects down at the end weren't going to be funded in that reasonable timeframe. And then also just based on the new requirements from FHWA, it just made it simpler to do a 10-year priority list. Our process itself, though, we're not going to require our local government partners to submit an application to enter the priority list, because as we believe, we should have all of your projects identified within the plan through either needs or cost feasible. So a call for project for us will happen at any point in the year if we determine that, hey, we don't have your project in our plan, or you determine that you have a new project that you would like entered into our plan for consideration. So we will continue that over the next year process, so we won't be doing a call for projects. To answer the July 1st deadline, it still works within what we're doing. Unfortunately, MetroPlan can't advance our TIP and project prioritization process before July, because it doesn't really work to adopt a priority list before we adopt a TIP. So we'll always kind of have that consistent. And though we're a little bit after the deadline, we're still going to work with the department to get them that priority list for state and federal funds. So they can start doing that gaming process early, because that's their concern. And that's why we have that kind of advanced deadline for July 1. But anything that's being funded through the federal funds, the TMA program, or that new off-system program, that's where, once we're done with this prioritization process, we will reach out to you as our local government partners and say, these are the projects that, based on the funding we believe is reasonably available, will be programmed in that next 5th year. So those will be the only applications we ask for you to submit. That way we're not doing redundant applications or having to update them multiple times through the process if they're not even getting programmed yet. We're going to try to work with the department to get them done as fast as possible. But as long as we can try to get applications in, hopefully before August, and we will work with you on those, we should be able to support them in their exercise. But because of the way we structured our Metropolitan Transportation Plan by pulling out all of those SU funds and TALU funds, as well as the SA funds into different lists, any project we identify for programming will still reserve those funds based on the year that we've identified. So we'll still work towards setting up that programming list based on fiscal year through this process that DOT can program as they're using the state road list to work through their gaming exercise. So I know we've advanced, or the department has advanced the cycle. That's for the whole district and all the other MPOs. We are in support of trying to get the programming done quicker so we can get through the work program. But our process is just a little bit longer delayed, but it still should fit within their process for programming because of the way we've structured the MTP. So I just wanted to address that and answer any questions on the programming and application side, if there are any.
All right, Nick, you've succeeded again in stirring up the committee. You always seem to do this to us, but then again, it's a very important subject when you're sitting on lots of federal money for all of us. So I appreciate your good work with that. I do have a couple minute quick question. Maybe you can address that. And that's just for the benefit of the group mainly. You and I may have talked about that, but it is about what criteria do you need to have as an entity to move your project to the TIP list from your own list?
Really, it's going to be a discussion on those performance measures. So when we look at your project and evaluate all of those 27 performance measures, it's, A, did we get that data right? If we got the data right, then it's still a measure of comparing that project to the other projects that we've identified. And that's where the performance-based planning is really kind of setting the stage there for us moving projects to meet those targets, because each one of those performance measures is designed to meet a safety, travel time, reliability, and other mobility targets. But we've set up those smaller programs. I don't want to say smaller, but like the regional TISMO program, the Complete Streets Studies program, as well as the safety and bike ped, the school mobility, and forgetting one more program. But all of those are designed to work with the Technical Advisory Committee a little bit more on identifying those other projects that can move forward that aren't quite just right there in the MTP. So those regional equipment purchases, or those sidewalk gaps that are needed, or some of those safety improvements that may be smaller and more push button that come out of a safety study that we can try to advance a little bit quicker than, say, the next 5th year. Because the way the plan is structured right now, we have allocated all of our funding over the 5 years within the TIP. So anything coming out of this project priority list, the first year available would be fiscal year 26, 27.
Gotcha. Thanks again for elaborating on that and for all your good responses there and good work on the PPL. Our next presentation is on the 2045 CFX Master Plan by our past chair of the Technical Advisory Committee, Mr. Will Hawthorne of CFX. Mr. Hawthorne, you have the floor. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Happy to be here this morning and happy to be presenting an update on our 2045 Master Plan development. Next slide, please. Next slide. Keith, I can't click the next slide. There we go. Okay. All right. So a lot of this you already know, but we'll go through it for as a refresher just to be sure. But CFX, Central Florida Expressway Authority, was created in 2014 as an agency of the state by the state legislature. The two biggest changes that occurred at that time were it expanded our jurisdiction outside of Orange County, and it allowed us to explore multimodal opportunities, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. It expanded our jurisdiction into Lake County, Seminole, Osceola, and later on Brevard County. Next slide. Next slide, please. You want me to share my screen? I lost the ability to share. I don't know if we can. Can we go to the next slide?
Well, if you click if you can share it, if you click on the right, are you clicking on the right arrow on your?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here.
Okay.
Good to go? Okay, all right. All righty, so we are governed by a 10-member board. We have representatives from each of the counties in our jurisdiction, as well as the Orange County mayor and the city of Orlando mayor. We also have 3 gubernatorial appointees, of which the 2 vacancies you see here were actually just recently appointed by the governor. So those have been fulfilled. Our system is currently comprised of 125 centerline miles of limited access expressways. They comprise of 408, 414, 417, 429, 451, 453, 528, and most recently 538, which is known as the Point Santa Parkway. With nearly 3 million residents in our Central Florida region and another 75 million visiting each year, the extraordinary growth calls for extraordinary planning, and that's why we're planning now for our 2045 master plan. In fact, the Orlando Economic Partnership still estimates that we're getting around 1,500 new residents each week into our region, into our area. So our 2045 master plan really sets a course of our future and where we're going as an agency. Each year, we have our fully funded 5-year work plan that is approved by our board that is updated each year. And to kind of bridge, forgive the noise behind me, but to bridge the gap between our 2045 master plan and the funded 5-year work plan is our 15-year capital improvement plan. And the primary purpose of this is so that we can project out our cash flows. I was not supposed to do that. To make sure that whatever projects we start, we can see them through to completion. When we did our 2040 master plan a little over 5 years ago, it was a massive listening tour that was spread out between our executive director, the deputy executive directors at the time, directors, and we went as far west as the city of Mascot and as far east as the Space Coast TPO to get your input on what needed to be put into our master plan. That 2040 master plan identified $11 billion in project needs across our 4-county jurisdiction at that time. I would note that Brevard County was not added into our jurisdiction until 2017. So they are now part of our jurisdiction and are part of the master plan process. By the year 2025, we will have invested $2.5 billion into our 5-county region, which I'll highlight some of the projects that were included in that master plan. One of the most notable interchange improvement projects was the 408-417 interchange. This project, the interchange itself was opened in late 1980s, early 1990s. It served us well for several years, for many years. And with the extraordinary growth, again, it was needed to update this and kind of bring it up to today's standards and more traditional interchange design. We were able to get rid of left-hand exits, and for the more traditional right-hand exits, get rid of some loop ramps. And you can see here a picture of the completed interchange. Another interchange I'm sure you're all familiar with is the 528-436 interchange. This too was opened in the early 1980s. It served us very well, but it too had the loop ramps, something that there were room for improvement for the number of visitors using this interchange. So we are getting rid of the loop ramps and actually constructing semi-directional ramps. It'll help traffic flow immensely and make it easier for residents and tourists to traverse and get to where they need to go. I briefly talked about the opportunity for us to look into multimodal partnerships. The first of its kind for us was our partnership with Brightline. As many of you know, they are co-located in our 528 right-of-way out to Brevard County. If you haven't driven that area lately, I encourage you to do so. They're moving pretty quickly, and we meet with them every 2 weeks. And we are continuing to get reports that they will have the first set of tracks being laid as soon as the end of this year. So take a drive out there. The corridor is really taking shape. Some of the major initiatives that were included in the 2040 master plan included adding 16 centerline miles to our system. The first were the Wekiva Parkway projects at the very north end of our system map here. That was the addition of 453 and a connection up to DOT's section of 4A, 4B. And most recently, with the merger of Osceola County Expressway with CFX, we took ownership of the 538 or Poinciana Parkway Expressway. Another major initiative is adding capacity to the Beltway system that we have. The 417 and 429, as well as 528, make up about 55 centerline miles of additional capacity that we're adding as part of this master plan. If I could pause here on this slide a little bit, most of you are aware that we are adding an additional lane in each direction on 417 and 429. Several of those projects are now under construction on 417. We have another one that just opened bids yesterday. We'll be advertising the last section of 417 hopefully within 2 weeks. And then we'll be moving to 429 to advertise. We have 3 design projects that are translating into 3 construction projects. Those will be following right behind the advertisement and award of our 417 project. So looking forward to getting those done. This map shows a conglomeration of all of our concept, feasibility, and mobility study areas. Most of these are complete. The 2 notable ones, the biggest one is the Osceola Brevard County Connector concept study that is underway. We've been working through that pretty nicely. It's got a number of different alternatives that are shaping up. Next step in the life of a project, as you all know, is the project development and environment study. Most of these, again, have been completed. The 2 that are active are the 414 Expressway Extension on the up near the Seminole Orange County line, and the Southport Connector Expressway PD&E study shown down here. For those of you who don't know, 414 is looking at an elevated expressway connection over the 3 signalized intersections to connect in with FDOT's I-4 Ultimate improvements, where they had the queue jumps over Maitland Summit and the other roads there. So that project PD&E study is slated to be complete this fall. We'll see what happens there, but it's moving along very, very nicely. Now we get into our design and construction. All of these projects highlighted are fully funded for design, and the 2 that are hatched on the west side or the left side of your screen are fully funded for construction. Those include the Lake Orange Expressway between US 27 and 429, kind of in the Schofield Road corridor, as well as the Point Santa Parkway extension to where Point Santa Parkway terminates today, or ties into Ronald Reagan Parkway near the Reedy Creek Bridge. It will have an expressway connection up to County Road 532 or the Osceola Polk Line Road. So again, why are we here? All of you are familiar with this process. We are seeking your input, your friends' input, your staff's input via a survey. It is a quick survey. Some of the questions you'd expect to see are: what are the transportation needs in your area? What are the multimodal accommodations you think we should be pursuing? And how do you think we should best prepare for future growth and management of traffic congestion? And last but not least, what sustainability practices do you consider? I don't know why it's doing that. Someone's got me on automatic transition, but what sustainability practices do you think we should consider on our system, and what are the high priorities? We are looking at, actually do have a couple projects now deploying photovoltaic systems to offset, tie in, do a net metering process at some of our bigger use sites along the system. But the survey is available at cfxway.com/master-plan. At this time, I appreciate your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. Very informative presentation. Anyone has any questions for Mr. Hawthorne? Are you going to provide a $25 certificate for the survey like MetroPlan does?
Have to get with our public involvement folks and see what we can do there. No questions. All right.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
As it seems that with the expansion, you're going all the way to the East Coast, to the Space Coast now with your planning and all that good stuff. You're trying to complete this loop around the greater Metro Orlando area, and you've almost done it pretty much, with exception of a couple of legs, if you will. Are there any plans for an inner loop, as this loop seems to be pretty massive around the area?
Inner loop kind of in the Osceola County area, is it?
No, inner loop inside the larger loop that we're looking at here to make things more accessible for the area.
I'm not aware of anything planned. If you think it's something we should look at, We do have options in the survey where you can write your own feedback and suggestions. We are looking for as much of that as we can. We do take it into consideration and use it in the development of this 2045 master plan, which we're hoping to have done towards the end of this year.
Excellent.
But Mr. Chairman, that's feedback that we really would like to get.
All right. With seeing no other raised hands for the questions, this will conclude the presentations for today. Thanks again, Mr. Hawthorne. We will move
Mr.
now.
Smith.
I did raise my hand.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I was trying to find the button. You hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Good. I had a question. I know I've driven the 429 many times down toward I-4 at the southern end. Is there anything planned for that area? It really backs up really badly as you're going like southbound on 429 into I-4 westbound. Do you guys looked into that? Is there anything planned to improve that interchange down there?
So that is actually the Turnpike's section of 429, but I do know that they've got it's a pretty large PD&E underway to, I don't know if they're the same PD&E, but they do have a PD&E that would connect into, it's an interchange modification that would essentially connect into our Point Santa Parkway extensions up through Osceola Polk Line Road to, kind of complete the T there. Make it a plus interchange. But yeah, Turnpike they've got the team on board. We've met with them a couple times, and I know they've got the project underway.
So where do you guys terminate then? Do you terminate at where do you guys stop on the 429? Right at Orange County line?
Our limits end at Seidel Road.
Okay.
And Turnpike picks up heading south from there. I don't want to, I don't want to put any words in Turnpike's mouth. I don't want to commit them to anything, but that's been my involvement. So my understanding is that the PD&E is well underway at this point.
Yeah, I just noticed it's a mess down there. There's always accidents, and then it backs up and so forth. What about the resurfacing on? I know you have widening on there for 429, so you're not going to resurface because you're just going to widen those whole sections there from Winter Garden all the way up to Maitland Boulevard tie-in, correct?
The projects, even though we're widening, we will be resurfacing the entire limits of those projects where we're widening.
Okay,
so
I know they're getting in rough shape. So
yeah, we've got a project out there to do some spot repairs to kind of get us through the MOT phase.
Good.
For our construction. You can see a lot of that happening right now in 429. But
Great.
It is something that actually in 429, we're going to be removing all of the pavement and putting it back to increase it by about a half inch or so.
Okay, great. Very good. Thank you, Will. Very good presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Again, I encourage everyone to take the survey, have your staff take it, just trying to get all that input in writing so that we can get together on our end and create a plan that helps the region.
Definitely will. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. Thanks for the involvement. I don't see any other raised hands. Anyone else? You can speak up now if you don't have a problem with raising your hand. All right. That's my cue to move on to the items for review and discussion. We have 3 items for review and discussions today. Item A is the review of the April 23rd meeting minutes, Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes, and this is found under your tab 1. I hope you all had a chance to look through that. Are there any corrections or revisions that needs to be brought up to staff's attention at this time? Okay, hearing none, as a reminder, these will be brought back for a formal approval at a future in-person meeting. Item B, our next item, is the FDOT amendments to the 2021-24-25 TIP found under tab 2 in your agenda package. And this will be presented by Mr. Keith Caskey from MetroPlan. Mr. Caskey.
Okay, well, this amendment includes 2 projects. One of these is a new resurfacing project on State Road 46 in Sanford. And this project includes bike and ped and safety improvements as well. And then the other project is the Sunset Drive Livable Streets project in Castleberry. And this just involves moving the existing construction funding from the current project number to a new project number. And as the chairman said, you all have the information on this in your agenda packets. So with that, I'll open it up and see if there's any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Caskey? I see a hand raised by Miss Mary Moskowitz. Miss Moskowitz, you're recognized.
No, thank you. So Keith, in the scope on the resurfacing project, it says that it will include the bike safety enhancements. Does that include enhancements over the bridge, over that railroad bridge there?
I will have to defer to FDOT staff on that. The only information that I have is just what's in the letter. But you know, if they can address that today, that's great. If not, we'll have to check on it and get back with you on that.
Okay.
I don't know. Virginia, do you have any information on that?
I do not have information. I'll have to find out and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? I see no hands raised at this point, unless Mr. Caskey see any, then he can stop me. We'll move to the third item today, which is the plan revisions to the 2045 MTP found under tab 3 in your agendas. Mr. Alex Strauger from MetroPlan Orlando will be presenting. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation and use the raise hand function as a reminder. Mr. Strauger, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, TAC members and those TSMO members who heard this a little earlier today. So staff is proposing a few amendments and modifications to our adopted 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. In the next slide, I'll provide a little bit of background. As Nick mentioned earlier, we adopted and approved, our board approved the 2045 planning cost feasible element at their December 9th, 2020 board meeting. Following that, we package all of our finalize and package our documentation and submit that to FDOT and Federal Highway for review. Still waiting for final comment on that. But since that time, we actually heard two pieces of feedback. One from our local agency partners about the LAP program and specifically pertaining to the construction assistance program that Nick talked about during the prioritization or PPL discussion. But I think more importantly, what really drove this amendment was some feedback and clarity that all MPOs, all 27 MPOs across the state heard from the Federal Highway Administration at a federal Florida Metropolitan Planning Partnership meeting, which, like I said, is a gathering of MPOs, FDOT districts, central office, and the Federal Highway Administration. And they provided some additional clarity as it pertains to consistency between planning documents and specifically relating to the Transportation Improvement Program and the 2045 MTP's existing plus committed network. So taking into account that feedback, we entered into a plan revision process where we identified, what we would be doing. But before I dive into the specifics on the next slide, I just want to briefly cover some terminology since this is our first plan revision to the 2045 plan. But we have two types of plan revisions. The first is what we call a modification, or more specifically, an administrative modification. So these are minor changes with really little to no impact on project funding or implementation. And modifications do not require a public comment period. So we were able just to advance those through the process. But we always do, engage the public by best practice, even for our modifications. And then we have our amendment process. And these are more significant, major impacts, changes in project cost, implementation, moving projects in and out of band years, and so forth. So two types of revisions, and we'll actually, based on this set or what I'm presenting to you today, we'll be actually modifying and amending the 2045 plan. In tab 3 of you can go to the next slide, please. But in tab 3 of your agenda packet, you will see the supporting materials and links to the proposed the documents with the proposed revisions as well. But the first one, as I mentioned, we received that feedback and clarity from FHWA relating to consistency between the adopted TIP and our 2045 plan. So with that feedback, we updated our existing plus committed network. Previously, we only had projects, committed projects that actually required funding into 2026. So now we've actually added all projects in the TIP into our existing plus committed network. So that was the first one there. So we amended, or rather modified, Table 6, Table 9, 11, 12, and 13. So these were just adding those projects, fully funded projects. So there are no impacts to existing cost feasibility of the projects that they were added before. The next is an amendment to the process, and that's or to the plan, and that's to our construction assistance program. So Nick talked about this as well earlier. The previous program adopted was construction of capacity or widening projects only. Based on feedback that we heard from some local partners, we're broadening that to a variety of multimodal project types. And as Nick mentioned in his PPL presentation, local governments still have to fund those preliminary phases of project development, but those funds are there to advance and expedite the construction phase. This is an amendment because the 2045 adopted plan identified specific projects. These were local funded projects that we identified and moved up to be funded with these federal funds. But because it's provided a little more flexibility in the program, we are not identifying those projects specifically in the MTP. Rather, we're just setting the funds aside, and those projects will be prioritized annually as part of our prioritized project list, providing that flexibility to TAC and TISMO as they identify and vet priorities. The third amendment that we're going through is actually another one based on local feedback. So Sandsburg Trail and Orange Boulevard, those projects are no longer going to be funded with federal or state funds, or be funded with another alternative source. So we removed those projects from Table 13 and Table 12 respectively. We also got some feedback on one project, specifically the Holden Gatlin intersection improvement project. Our plan based on the cost model that we had only included the intersection improvements. It did not include an important aspect of that project, which is actually the rail relocation, which makes a lot of those intersection improvements and the effectiveness of those improvements possible. So we added and increased the project cost for that one. Based on that cost, it doesn't impact any other projects, and it remains cost feasible between the years 2030 and 2035. We also received feedback from the town of Windermere and wanting to add a segment of the Windermere Ward Trail to the bike and pedestrian infrastructure needs. So we went ahead and did that. It is a need, so it doesn't impact any other projects, and it is identified in the plan as an unfunded need. We also received some feedback from Osceola County, kind of right at the point of adoption, and a little bit additional feedback afterwards. So we were able to incorporate, adding those projects, splitting some of the segments, and updating some of the limits on those. Those are locally funded Osceola County projects, so no impacts to cost feasibility, and that particular one would be a modification there. And then the fourth bullet pertains to our congestion management process. The first three relate to our cost feasible plan, but our board also adopted the congestion management process in December as part of the MTP. Previously, we had roadway and emergency response and roadway clearance times that we extracted out of the FDOT Sun Guide system. It wasn't as consistent as some of the other reporting information that we were receiving month to month from the DOT incident management coordinator. So we're just revising the data and the source that we're using to obtain that information, so it's consistent for all reports and products. So we're modifying Table 1 there to include that updated information. So again, these are the proposed revisions to the plan. No significant impacts to cost feasibility other than the deletions of those two local project, or those two projects that are now going to be locally funded. And the big push and drive of this revision process really was that first one, which was to ensure that we remain compliant with federal guidance and expectations about including the existing plus committed network within the adopted plan. So with that being said, this is an action item that our board will be taking up at their June meeting. You can go to the next slide, please. But today we're just requesting your feedback, getting general consensus so your chair can report that during their June board meeting. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to field those at this time. If not, we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Strauger. Are there any discussion items or questions that you have for Mr. Alex Strauger at this time? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the eighth part of our of our presentation, part of our agenda today, and that is the tech committee only presentations. And we have one tech presentation, and that is by the safety committee, the ad hoc committee, if you recall, that we had put together to respond or provide recommendation to the Dangerous by Design report that we've discussed. So we'll now hear from the chair of that committee, Ms. Laura Hardwick. Ms. Hardwick, please proceed.
Hello. So a group of 5 TAC members met on May 4th to address our area's pedestrian fatality challenges and to produce the recommendation to the TAC. So we recommend that MetroPlan Orlando create a working group with a diverse set of members to focus on protecting our most vulnerable road users from serious and fatal injuries. The primary focus to be on corridor speeds. We recommend the group have representation from FDOT, the TAC, TSMO, the Community Advisory Committee, Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, LYNX, Best Foot Forward, and local law enforcement.
Is that your report?
Yes.
Excellent.
Nice and quick.
Thank you for your good work, and I want to especially thank each and every member of the committee, including yourself, Mr. Kelly, Ms. Granola, Mr. Smith, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Wharton, and Ms. Richmond, all these people that volunteered, including the supervision or the people that dedicated some time for MetroPlan as well, Mike Wilson, as well as Nick Lepp. I want to thank you all for that, and we'll take that recommendation to the MetroPlan board during the next committee report that's going to take place next month, I believe.
Great.
Thank you all. The next item is general information.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I see Tanya Laurie has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So just a little bit more information from Laura. What would this working groups, if it was adopted by the board, what would its mission be? What would it be? What would it be in charge of? Can you just give a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, so we wanted to keep our recommendation flexible because the folks in that meeting were just TAC members, and we think the response needs to incorporate a lot of different folks. That's why I mentioned all those different groups to have representation for. But the working group would have hopefully a time-bound goal to address pedestrian safety in many ways, but we wanted to specifically call out those corridor speeds based on the data that we've seen everywhere, but most recently from Mike Wilson's presentation and how we sort of went through the data after Dangerous by Design was released. So main focus on pedestrian safety through corridor speeds.
So you would just be making recommendations for improvements to different corridors and based on the data?
I think a lot of that will have to be up to the committee to decide because they're multi-jurisdictional, and that's the benefit of having MetroPlan host this committee because those corridors overlap all of our jurisdictions, and having FDOT on that as well. So again, we want to keep it open for them to be able to really decide within that probably first year, a time bound, what that mission will be. But the impetus on reducing fatalities and serious injuries.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't, in doing this mission, and not that I'm opposed to it, but we do have CTST meetings within our different, I know Osceola does, I assume the rest of the jurisdictions have that, where we have, you know, the sheriff's office in place, the school board, or, you know, the school district, I think FDOT, we have Sunrail representatives and things like that. So I just would want to make sure that we're not sort of bumping against what their mission is as well. Because
absolutely.
Because
so that came up in the conversation, is making sure that we're not redundant to what the CTSTs are already doing, but the region is consistently ranked on that dangerous by design list. And so this working group would be able to take a regional approach as opposed to each individual county or jurisdiction, and with the hope that we can learn from what other folks are doing, what works, how to navigate different processes with our state DOT, and then extrapolate that so we can see improvements on those corridors that really cross all of our counties.
Okay, I'd just be looking forward to getting more information as you all move forward.
Yeah, it's definitely higher level right now so that the committee can really dive into what that looks like.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Allure, let me ask you this. Do you see some sort of engagement between the CSD and this committee, or do you think we should just stay out of it completely? I mean,
I think that there's, you know, and I think there could be engagement between them. I just think, you know, we ran into this a little bit with some coordination with, you know, Best Foot Forward, where we have, you know, a set of priorities that we work through the CTST, which may, you know, be a little different than those priorities. So I just wouldn't want another set of priorities. And, you know, we're all competing for the same funding, you know, so we can't have three different lists kind of thing, you know. The goal is always safety first and moving projects through. I just want to make sure that we're not having another working group that prioritizes something different than a group that's already there, CTST kind of thing. They've got to work together rather than opposing.
that makes sense. But then again, to the committee point, it seems like we had the obligation of voicing our voice, if you will, to where we stand with that. So maybe Ms. Hardwick could take that into as part of your recommendation to involve CTS in one way or another. I will get the rest involved. Mr. Shadsmith, you have your hand raised. You have the floor.
Yes, I appreciate very much the committee or the working group or whatever we're called, or you called yourselves. And thank you, Laura, very much for your time and speaking up. I just, the dangerous by design, and I know a lot of us are always concerned about it and the numbers and what we see. And just, was there any thought? I mean, we used to have the BPAC, and you know, we got rid of the BPAC right when dangerous by design started hitting everybody. It's just kind of ironic. And now, you know, MetroPlan got rid of BPAC right when the bike and peds became the biggest hot issue kind of regionally. And I just don't know how we're going forward, you know, with a working group when we used to have a committee that kind of tried to handle the stuff that was some of these things. And we had all those different parties part of it already. So I'm just bringing that back again. Obviously I've brought this up before. It always seemed ironic to me and I don't know, not the best approach when we did that. So also on Tawny's point on the CTSTs, I know I'm one of the few engineers or planners that participate in the Seminole County CTST, and I thought that's not an uncommon occurrence. So the CTST is often so much law enforcement focused. Sunrail does come, which is great, and usually a DOT representative there, which is great too. But we could always use more on any of the CTSTs of the engineers and planners getting involved. That would really be a positive. I know even the CTST, usually there's a rep who's heading it, usually some kind of police agency person. I believe counties is a lieutenant at the sheriff's office, and they're so, short staffed, they don't make these meetings. So I don't know if any of the other officers do, but that is something I think is good to try to get into. And I think some of those guys that go to those, they've gone to these meetings, our meetings, and they just don't see the use, so they don't bother coming. But I think there should be better coordination between those. As Tawny said, I'll just kind of second her thoughts about that, making sure we all kind of are going in the same direction, do the best, because they do have definitely a part in keeping speeds and other things, and we can all kind of work together on that. So, but thank you very much.
Great, good
Chairman.
feedback from both. Mr. Mike Wilson, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to point out that what we're going to be looking at, because we're a planning agency, is more of the planning level work. And as Chad was alluding to, I think what you see more at the CTSTs is more of the more on the ground engineering as well as law enforcement. So I hope what we can do can be complementary to the CTSTs. So we'll certainly be working with them to bring to them what we're doing at a higher planning level.
Good feedback. I have a question to each one of you. Do you feel that we need to perhaps have a representation from this committee, ad hoc committee, into the CTS, or vice versa? Regardless of what the CST does, and I apologize for interrupting, Mike. We have a focused duty, and we all have been repeating the word. We have high speeds that resulted into this ranking with this group. So I think this is, in addition to the overall safety, there should be some, narrowed down focus on what the issue is, what we agree on as the issue, I should say. Mike?
Well, I agree. We need to share with them what our findings have been, from looking at the data, so they understand where we're coming from.
Thank you. Anyone else that has any feedback on this? All right. Well, thank you again, Ms. Hardwick. And perhaps when you send the final recommendation, in light of this discussion, you might want to revise it. We'll leave that up to the committee members. Thank you again for your volunteering and good hard work to come up to address this issue for the committee. The next item is upcoming general information is going to be, there's a list of general information found under tab 4 in your agenda packet. The next item would be next meeting date for the Technical Advisory Committee, and that's going to be June 24th. There will be no July meeting for the Tech Committee. However, as you heard from Mr. Caskey earlier, the June meeting will be the last meeting that would be virtual. Not to say that there's not going to be participation virtually, but we'll reconvene physically in a room, and perhaps we will have the quorum at that time. We'll be able to address a lot of the issues. MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be held on June 9th, and that's a hybrid meeting, as you've heard before, with some board members and staff are present physically in person, and other board members and staff will be present virtually on Zoom. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any committee members who have other business to discuss with the rest of the committee. Please use the raise hand function if you have any questions to be recognized. anyone has any other business at this time?
See,
Okay.
Kenya has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Henson, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of FDOT, I'd just like to real quickly make mention of the availability of funding for the High Visibility Enforcement Program. Information should have been received from central office out to our partners throughout the state. Just making everyone aware of the high visibility grant that's available. For District 5, we have Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County that are counties that are available for the funds. It's for officer overtime hours to conduct enforcement operations throughout their county, their respective counties. So if anyone is interested in additional information, please feel free to reach out to me or to our modal office, bike ped office for more information. But I just wanted to make sure, since we had an audience here, that everyone is aware of the availability of the high visibility enforcement program funding. And last year we left, as a district, we left probably about almost $300,000 on the table. So there is money allocated for the high visibility each year. The program has funding available. Applications are accepted throughout the year. It's on a first come, first served basis, but we are leaving money on the table when we aren't applying for those funds. So I just wanted to make mention of that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for remembering to offer this thing to the committee members and make us aware of that. Any comments, any other business that anyone else would like to share with the group?
I don't see any other hands, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, Mr. Caskey, thank you very much. This brings me to the public comment, the second public comment segment of our meeting today. And I will just directly ask, since we've heard this a number of times, are there any questions or comments at this time from the public?
Don't see any hands there either.
All right. Are there any written or phone comments that were submitted prior to this meeting today, Mr. Caskey?
No, there were not.
Great. At this time, if there are no other further business, I want to thank your participation and your engagement today. I truly appreciate it. It's, as usual, educational and beneficial to all of us. Wishing you all a great weekend, and this meeting stands adjourned.